Welcome everyone to the Vibe Sales Series podcast. And today we have our 5th episode with a very dear guest, who is Miguel Arroja, who is sales leader for EMEA at Deepgram. So Miguel, thanks a million for coming. We're super excited to learn from your experience in sales during this session. You're right now at the intersection of AI and sales, and I'm genuinely very curious to learn more about all of your experience. So Miguel, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Joel. Delighted to be here and spending the next half an hour with you and our guests.
It's going to be very nice. I'm very curious also to start this session with a story. And I think this really kind of puts us in this mood about, what's the session going to be about? So do you have any story that you would like to share with us and with the audience?
Yeah, I think preparation in sales is really important. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity of sharing a little story for the beginning. I remember giving you a ring before the podcast so that we could align on the main topics that are key for your audience. So wanted to make sure I could start with a story. So let me take you back to a time that I was 7 years old. I was, as most kids, have too much time in the summer, so I was spending time with my grandfather in his little retail store. This was the time where people actually didn't use their phones to take pictures as we do today. They had to buy a camera. So my grandfather sold cameras, really small retail business, mom and pop's shop. And as I was seeing him work over the summer, there's a lady that comes in, barging in by the door. We'll call her Janet. And Lady Janet comes in and she's like, "Oh, Mario," my grandfather was Mario, "you're not going to believe this. I've been to this shop and that shop and they've tried to sell me a camera for XYZ functionality and they want me to buy it because of this reason and because of that reason. My brain is fried. I just need a camera that works for what I need." And, I remember my grandfather, seeing the lady was so agitated, "Lady Janet, why don't you take a seat? Would you like a cup of tea? Can I get something for you?" And then he started doing questions to ask about her need. Why do you need the camera? Turns out she needs the camera because her last of 3 daughters is going to get married. And on the second wedding of the second daughter, she took a picture, but the light was not right for that type of camera and she didn't take the most perfect picture for the daughter's wedding. So now imagine yourself in her position. She's marrying the third of 3 daughters, no more opportunities to get it right, and she needs the right camera in order to take the picture. So, he sits her down, goes make her comfortable, etc. And obviously, she ends up buying the camera. And the lesson for me was, I asked my grandfather, Grandpa, what's the reason that you took so long to sell the lady the camera? She clearly has been to other places before. You could have maybe done that fast, etc. And I remember my grandfather looking at me, 7 years old, like a donkey, tapping me in the shoulder, like I just asked the most stupid question ever. And he says, "Miguel, that lady wasn't looking for a camera. She was looking to take the most perfect picture to her daughter's wedding." And at the time I was 7 years old, I didn't understand, still a donkey in that regard. But many years later, now in sales for the purposes of this conversation, the lesson is you can never listen your way out of a sale, but I've seen a lot of salespeople talk their way out of a sale by focusing on things that are not relevant for the customer. Forrester says that 75% of buyers oftentimes feel the conversation is not relevant for them. So that's why I wanted to share with this story, because I think at 7, I didn't learn the lesson then, but hopefully I learned it later in my life, that listening to the customer and deeply understanding their needs is so important, so critically important.
I think it's a massive story and also with a very key learning for the profession of salespeople, right? Because we see so many sellers that are either like order taking. So, okay, someone comes into the shop, do you want a camera? Okay, here's the camera. Or feature selling, no? So this camera does A, B, C, and D, which one you want? But I think like what your grandpa did, and I think is a master move in sales, like actually understanding what do you want to accomplish, what's the outcome that you're looking for. Because at the end, it's not about selling the features, but it's selling the outcomes of like what this product has to offer, no?
Yes.
Very nice. And so also, Miguel, just to kind of put a bit of perspective, because like for our listeners and the audience, it's also very relevant, all of your experience in sales, no? I saw that you actually went through the startup world with Uniplaces back in the days. Then you also went into Salesforce, but not only within Salesforce, the core product itself, but also with things like MuleSoft or Slack, which are like the big acquisitions. And so you've been managing very different types of teams, whether on different products. And I wanted to ask you, how have you adapted yourself to selling different types of products that really vary from one another? And now it's the case with Deepgram as well.
Yeah, I'm privileged to have worked for companies where it's not a product-led conversation. It's very much a problem-led conversation. What problem is the customer facing? So I think regardless of any product that you might be selling, what made the difference for me was having mentors that basically tell me, you got to dominate three things. The first thing you need to dominate is, what is the problem? What are the problems and the difficulties and the barriers that people are facing that your product can support them on? The customer is the hero, the product is the enabler, the remover of the obstacles, and how can you help them remove some of those obstacles faster or better or in a more meaningful way so that they can shine within their organizations, right? So number one, what is the problem that people are facing? Why do they need to come to you? The second part is, how do we fix that problem, or how do we address that problem differently than other folks? Because if everyone is fighting for the same type of way of fixing the problem, it's a very commoditized market. Now, I've been very lucky. I've got friends that work in commoditized industries. Those are very difficult industries to work for. I feel very privileged when I'm working in tech. There's products that have a lot of differentiation going into it, a lot of investment of product, of investigate R&D, research and development. So it allows you to differentiate your solution. But the way I like to differentiate is not what's on the marketing deck. It's I instantly, as soon as I join, even if it's a new logo motion, I call the existing customers that we've got and I say, why did you buy from us? Specifically, what made you buy from us instead of the alternative? And I ask something that I think is very important is, what was that alternative? You'd be very surprised. In SMB, the alternative was often doing nothing. I worked in SMB for over 5 years. So in that regard, if someone has the risk of doing nothing, you are fighting against the status quo, right? So I remember selling to a manufacturing company. They said, oh no guys, we're okay. We only do a couple of fairs. Hold on a second. You say you don't need the CRM. How many fairs do you do? We do 4 trade shows a year, about once per quarter. A trade show, how much does that cost? That costs about 50K per trade show. That's 200K. If you do one less trade show, but you only do the 3 ones that bring you the most leads and you get a CRM, isn't that better? So it's you got to understand what's the competitor, right? Because they weren't thinking about another CRM. They either did it with us or they didn't do it at all. So that's one thing that I think is important. What are you competing with? Is it the status quo, risk of doing nothing? Is it another solution? And in the cases of MuleSoft and Slack, you often compete with Microsoft Teams, which most companies have for free. So you got to find a coexist play, a way for the two tools to exist better. And it's mainly about war for talent. Companies want to hire bright, ambitious, hardworking people like you that are now in your entrepreneurial journey. They want to get those people. Can you do that if you give them Teams? The conversation is, are you able to hire top talent if you give them Slack? Because the best companies in the world were using Slack. So that's, you got to understand what is the pitch, what is the angle that you are playing. And there is also a winning the war for talent conversation in that specific regard. For MuleSoft, to keep it short, in MuleSoft, it's very technical technology, very similar to what I'm doing now at Deepgram. You talk to technical-based folks. Use cases and technical architecture are very important to understand. So people will buy primarily for the driver of the reduction of risk. They need to feel that you are de-risking and reducing the risk of their purchase, because it's probably going to integrate with their ERP better, give them more clean data, and that allows them to better and more efficiently run the company.
It's super interesting, and yeah, in what you discussed, there are many things that resonate, but first thing is really being able to understand what's the total picture around why you're selling this specific product. And this goes through discovery, what you were also doing by talking to existing customers, understand the full picture, is because you need to have as many data points as you possibly can. Yeah. So whenever you're going to pitch to the potential new customers, that you have a very compelling story.
Yes.
And then also competing for this talent. At the end of the day, you don't find good salespeople everywhere. It's actually a rare asset. So I wanted to ask you, you've now been through this process of actually building your entire sales team here for Deepgram in EMEA. What is what you were looking for in order to identify those potential top performers as opposed to the rest of the performers?
I think that's a great question. And I welcome the opportunity of really explaining. There's 3 main pillars that I based on the hiring. The number one is PhD. So I had the VP that once told me, you don't need to hire people that have got a PhD, but they need to have a level of PhD. What do I mean by this? Persistence, heart, and desire. Desire or discipline. But it's very important that persistence. Can anyone be successful in sales without persistence? Number one interview question. Walk me through a deal where you've had to show persistence as one of the keys to win the deal. You don't have a story where you can articulate persistence, you're probably not going to do very well on my team. Heart, and especially heart and desire, in the context of it's very easy to teach certain skills to people. They can run better discovery, they can run better negotiations, they can make sure they negotiate upfront contracts and get mutual commitments, qualify out, etc. It's very hard to teach people heart, desire, hunger, things that are the intangibles that make such a huge volume of difference. I always say the salesperson that is going to sell the most might be behind on their credit card bills, might be looking to do the down payment for a mortgage, for a house, might want to buy their parents the best possible healthcare for the last chapter of their lives. Like, you don't know. But what motivates salespeople that have that ultimate hunger and desire, I find that it's incredibly hard to replicate. A good OTE, a good company, a good technical stack, good culture is important, but it doesn't replace people that have a lot of hunger. And the third one, like I said, discipline, people that do things consistently. Even when you're not in the mood, like prospecting, even when your pipeline seems a little bit more full. I have one person on the team now that is mastering prospecting, and that person comes to me, I'm actively prospecting because I already know when I close these 2 deals, my pipeline is going to take a hit. So he's thinking the pipeline takes a hit even though he's closing business. And that's the right approach, because the bucket gets more lean and gets more empty, so you need to fill it up again.
That's super powerful. And yeah, so you need to actually hunt while you're closing. So it's not actually so obvious to kind of to find the balance between those two. And yeah, I love like this PhD way of kind of framing hiring. On top of that, you've actually been managing very multicultural and international teams. And so my question is, how have you managed to navigate the complexity of different cultures as well, not only within your team specifically, but also towards the customers that you've been selling towards?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You live in Switzerland. I've got some folks on my team now living in Switzerland. Very methodical, very organized. Meetings always start on time, always finish on time. You got to be respectful and adaptive to that specific culture. When you are in Spain, for example, one of the most important markets where I've worked in my career, obviously, if someone says the meeting is after lunch, people can be, 10, 15, sometimes even 20 minutes late. And you got to factor in for that, right? So you can't probably stack up the meetings all one after another. And you need to allocate sufficient level of buffer. I also think something that is really important that you need to adapt yourself to is the cultural context, right? If you put on a matrix the size of the company and cultural context of that specific country or culture, you're going to find out things such as, in enterprise, people tend to follow the leader and the hierarchy quite a lot. In more startup, innovative companies, there's a lot more of collaboration and a lot less hierarchy. So the way I factor those things in is, for example, if you want to conduct a workshop, it's very relevant to conduct a workshop with all the people in the room if it's like a startup, high-tech company. If it's an enterprise company, you might not necessarily want to have the leadership in the room so that some of the mid-level management problems can surface in a more honest and transparent way, which you can then document in an executive briefing to the C-level. So that's ways where you've got to adapt. Most importantly, to keep it simple, pattern recognition and pattern influence. So you recognize certain patterns, you start recognizing, for example, that in the likes of Spain, people take a lot of holidays in July and August. So those are months where you potentially need to do pre-book to preempt the risk of your pipeline not closing on those months. You need to make sure you're asking people about PTO. Other places like the Nordics, for example, they take all of July. All of July, I remember it was end of quarter at Salesforce. So July was always a very difficult month for those folks in the Nordics culture. Then you've got other examples like, I remember a very brief story. Salesforce primarily started to be very successful in Germany after they've opened 5 offices. So smaller offices in each of the main cities instead of one major office like the one we have in Dublin, where you and I have met. Yeah. They opened 5 offices, all the main hubs in Germany, because they wanted to generate trust locally within the markets. What they call the Mittelstand, the mid-market of each of those respective enterprise tissues was very important for them. In other places like Ireland, you can just have a massive HQ, and that's what everyone does.
Yeah, you can just travel, meet the customers every 2-3 weeks, be there, just manage to close or to interact with all of those profiles all at once. Super interesting. So you mentioned about your story at Salesforce. So let's say the biggest tech company in B2B sales. Let's say that's kind of the company that invented the concept of CRM, that brought everything to the cloud. It's been I think it's going to be above 40 billion revenue this year.
Yeah.
And now you're actually joining a company that just recently raised 130 million, also at a very big valuation and with a very strong traction potential. But I wanted to ask you, how do you differentiate how you saw Salesforce when you left versus how Deepgram looks like now that you've joined in the last months?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think to really focus on that differentiation, we got to look at three things, right? Making sure that you understand the owner of the problem. Who is the owner of the problem that you're looking to solve when you sell CRM? Maybe the COO, maybe the head of sales, can even be the CEO if it's a smaller company. But typically, if it's a larger company, it's going to be the head of sales or the VP of sales. When you talk about other examples like MuleSoft, it's primarily sold to heads of IT, VPs of innovation and technology, VPs of technology, VPs of engineering, VPs of integration. So it's lowering the risk of integration. When you think about Slack, it can actually be sold to different types of people. We had Slack been purchased by the founders because it's like the operating mechanism for all the company to operate with. We've had it, be acquired by departments like tech and dev, where it's really, really important for the productivity part of developers. All of these concepts are differentiated, but in Deepgram, where we are primarily focused on a technical buyer, understanding the use case, understanding what they're going to be actually using the product for, what outcomes are they looking to achieve is primarily important. So I would say that the companies might change, the people that you sell to might change as well, but you need to be looking at what stays the same. And what stays the same is that people are going to typically make purchasing decisions to tackle difficult problems that they are solving, problems that they might have attempted to solve before and they might have failed with either a homegrown solution or some other technical solution that they may have bought. And they want to make sure they've got the right approach for change management, for adoption, really getting the right value out of the tool. So what I've noticed now at Deepgram, for example, is that it's a very customer-centric way of selling because there's pilots, paid pilots. We convert a lot of those pilots. We have a huge conversion rate on those pilots because customers, once they get the testing of our technology, then they feel very comfortable to move forward to a purchasing decision. At Salesforce, you did a pilot and you would probably get fired because no one did pilots, right? Because it's SaaS, it's got customization, setup time, so the time to value is much slower. As the time to value gets much better in the AI world, you can afford to do pilots and it should actually be the right part of your motion. As long as you've got a certain set of KPIs, like what are we looking to achieve? Are we going to jointly put time and the commitment of time every week to go over how the testing is going and what are the KPIs to hit that success? So I think for people that might be listening, it's really, really important to understand what is the best motion to sell that product so that you are reducing the risk for the customer and driving high level of trust in a purchasing decision.
Okay, I love it. Something that you kind of touched upon, but I think it's very important also to connect the dots, is you're actually now selling a pretty technical product and you're also in this motion of, okay, we're actually selling by use cases. And so how do you manage to make sure that your sales reps are able to connect how your solution helps versus what is the problem that they're hearing from the customer and how to kind of connect those two dots? For value selling?
I like to say to the team that customers don't buy because of how well they understand us. They buy because of how well we understand them. So it's again, primarily focused on what are you looking to achieve? What other ways have you tried to tackle this problem in the past and which might have failed? How was that experience? And what is really more than what you were looking to achieve and how have you tried to tackle the problem in the past is who gets impacted by this decision, right? Is this decision going to have implications on product because you're a tech company and you're going to need voice as part of your AI stack? Is this going to be a technology that is going to impact contact center and customer experience metrics? Just yesterday, I was at an event that focused a lot on customer experience. We had customers talk about on stage about three main KPIs: average handle time, first call resolution, and the CSAT, the Net Promoter Score. So all of those are things that you want to map out. Do we have a path to show a return on improving any of these factors? If we don't, we're going to be in trouble because it's very easy to reject a solution at the director level, finance VP level. Right now, there's a lot of scrutiny in any purchasing decision that's going on. According to Forrester, there's, I think the threshold is lower by at least a couple of $100K for the threshold of purchasing decisions that are made in mid-market and enterprise companies. That means finance people get involved a lot more often. When money was cheap many years ago, you probably will have remembered that we got decisions faster and there weren't so much scrutiny. Now what I think is happening is you need to really have a path to the return, to the commercial return. Like, how are we going to justify the purchasing decision on this and how are people going to take value out of this tool?
Yeah, always having a business case, backing up the numbers and ROI in the short, medium, long term, no? Being able to really transmit this type of trust into what we're buying. No?
Absolutely.
Very interesting. So when it comes to like the difference in between how companies, like, I don't know, when we were both of us at Salesforce, we sold in a particular way, but now a lot of things have changed since then.
Oh yeah.
And AI has really changed the whole equation on how salespeople are doing their day to day. And my question is then for you, like, how have you seen the new tech stack of like how an AI native sales company as you guys are now are actually selling?
Yeah, I'm privileged to be working for a company that has a very well developed tech stack. There's literally significant investments that the company has made in order to make sure that all of us salespeople have the best resources at our disposal to be effective in dealing with customers. We're talking about a tool specifically for call recording and call coaching so that you can make sure the reps are, being effective on their calls, but also record the calls and find patterns. We're talking about a stack that is comprised of Slack and Glean. So, a tool that is primarily focused on sharing enterprise communications layer, but also the knowledge layer that is behind it, unifying all the layer of knowledge within the company, all the knowledge sources, whether that's Notion, whether that's Salesforce, whether that's Slack, etc., and making sure that that information is easy to find out. Wonderful tool, Glean. I have nothing but good words to say about Glean from that aspect. I wouldn't be able to live without Glean. If I were to go back at Salesforce where we didn't have Glean, it would clearly be a handicap for me because it's, again, for our case as a remote company, makes us very, very productive from that point of view. Even arriving to a customer meeting, you're running a workshop, customer has a question. Let me ping one of my engineers, and your engineer is actually Glean, and you can get the technical information you need for your product right away at the tip of your fingertips. I think other topics that are important is using specific AI tools like Claude. Big fan of Claude. I think it's wonderful for sales productivity. We've seen an increase in the quality of our outbound. We've seen an increase in the focus that we are doing of existing customers, making sure that we more deeply understand their use cases. I've seen wonderful benefits about summarizing meetings, making sure that it's allowing reps to be more productive in putting their notes on the CRM, which I think is something that you do at VibeSell, saving reps a ton of time. I think any tool that saves time, in a nutshell, any tool that saves time or makes the reps better in terms of their conversion rate is a tool that I'm going to be vouching for.
It's super interesting, and at the end of the day, it's also how do you leverage that at the different layers of the organization, like how individual contributors are leveraging that on their day-to-day, but also how you as a manager, you can also manage better your team because like who's struggling with what, who needs support with what type of deal, or you can also analyze those patterns as you were saying, across the entire organization, or even you were mentioning the other day, the US market is super strong in Deepgram. And now EMEA is going to kind of go into this direction as well.
Yeah.
So what can we pick up from the best minds in the US market that we can also gently take into the European market? So I really find a lot of value on what you're saying. And my question is, you had a glimpse about VibeSell, you saw a bit about the solution as well. So how do you think real-time guidance can support salespeople across different functions across the company?
I think real-time guidance plays a key role when you are onboarding new reps. The fact that there is real-time guidance on the call and that someone can get insights that they probably are, they want to do a good job, but they've arrived at a short space of time and they need to get results, right? Because everyone carries a quote, everyone carries a number. You want to make sure that you're doing your pipe gen. You want to make sure you're doing your pipe progression. So I think the real-time guidance on the call can be really effective, especially for reps with lower tenure. And I think that can be a unique benefit. Another benefit that I think can exist is when we're talking about sales development, right?
Yeah.
Such a unique business function to focus on pipe gen. If they've got real-time guidance, perhaps they haven't seen a full sales cycle, perhaps they have less experience in terms of the unique benefits the solution can bring. Think of them having an AI tool that can tap into all of that knowledge from all the deals that we have won and now we've documented those deals. And if a customer speaks about that problem, you can mention, hey, just by the way, I'm not the direct account executive in charge of that account, but I'd be happy to talk you through how a certain account XYZ is using us in that very context in which they wanted to achieve the purposes of the KPIs that you're looking to achieve as a business. So I think that's really important as well for SDRs. And I think the third one is real-time guidance when we're talking also about customer success. customer success calls. What have we done in the past? What types of workshops? What type of engagements have we done with the customer that can help grow the lifetime value and the trust the customer is putting in us? I think that's incredibly relevant as well.
Very powerful. So onboarding, sales development, customer success.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a fun story, but on Friday last week, I was doing cold calling until 2 a.m. Zurich time because the US market was still open, right?
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
like, I can still push like so many hours to make sure that I manage to find new opportunities and so on. And I did this cold call. It was quite a long time that I hadn't done cold calling. And like basically I pick up the phone, start doing calls in the California market. And then I get a pick up from the chief revenue officer of a company making 500 million revenue.
Wow.
And the guy, I just made like the opening. I had a very clear like hook and what to present as well. And he was like, Joe, we're actually looking right now into this specific topic, like real-time guidance for our salespeople. And the thing that he mentioned first, it was the onboarding. And so I was curious to like connecting the dots on like what you were mentioning on how real-time guidance can help. And also this experience about doing a cold call to a sales leader. I was curious to hear your thoughts. Like, do you think cold calling is still alive? Because I have the feeling that a lot of salespeople are kind of stopping doing cold calls. Like I see a lot of SDR teams or even account executives just like hiding behind screens and just sending like sequences. And now Clay is very predominant. So everyone is like doing sequences or Apollo. But what is your personal opinion or your perspective on where cold call is going and how outbound is being done today?
I think the status of how outbound is being done today is there's a huge automation of outbound from the point of view of the written messaging, whether that's the LinkedIn basho, the email basho. All that outbound is getting done with a lot of support from AI, and a lot of people are using it the right way. I've seen some bad stuff as well of people that don't check AI for hallucinations. They don't check AI for making sure that the message is effective in its reasoning. And I don't think, in regards to your question, it's not a matter of either or. It's both ends. It's not is cold calling dead. Is where is cold calling alive? If your industry permits to still reach a CRO of a company size like that, it's probably still the best tool, but he's probably going to say, write me an email with more information. And that's probably going to be one of the follow-ups. So to go higher in the organization and then start working with people that are reporting directly into that person with the buy-in that you came in via that person, cold calling is still very effective. So it's not a matter of either or, it's both and. What I would recommend is you potentially want to send a LinkedIn voice note over the mobile app of LinkedIn to recap the conversation with that person. And that way you have the voice, you can play with the tone, you can play with, it was a really powerful conversation, Mr. X. I wanted to make sure that we followed up. You mentioned that I could speak to Jane in your team so that we could talk about this onboarding use case, making reps more productive. You're going to be hiring 200 reps. If we onboard those reps a month faster, you've gained 200 months out of productivity. And that's immediately, in a minute, you've got ROI, who's the next person you want to talk to, what's the next step. And I think that's, LinkedIn for voice notes can be very powerful on the mobile app. Email automation, of course. Cold calling, again, to reach certain people, that's probably the only way that you're going to be able to reach them. Now, some technical folks, are they against cold calling? Yes, they are. But in that case, what I always say to the team is, let's assume this person is going to have a really hard time picking up the phone. Okay, what do we need to do to gain their trust of having access to their phone number? And then start with texting first. Start with texting. Some countries are very big on WhatsApp. Send a WhatsApp. Check if you can get some feedback back. Hey, I want you to have my number. I want to be available to you at any point you are undergoing testing, at any point you are evaluating us, at any point you need to share my contacts with other people. I want you to have my WhatsApp to know that you can rely on me as looking after you, the person here that looks after you and your success. That builds buyer intimacy, that builds buyer proximity. So anytime where you can get that cold advantage from the cold call or from the cold reach out, anything that can compound in your sales cycle, I'm hugely in favor and vouch for that frequently.
Yeah, super relevant. And how do you think the volumes of like how many ops opportunities a salesperson can actually handle simultaneously has changed between now and how we used to sell some years ago before the AI boom?
I think that's a great question because clearly salespeople now can handle more volume than they were able to handle before because they've got summarization tools, they've got call or real-time guidance on the calls, they've got a bunch of tools that allow them to be more productive. At the same time, don't handle a level of opportunities that is going to be unsustainable to do good levels of basic prep call, during call, and post-call follow-up. Don't handle a level of opportunities that's not going to allow you to involve the extended team, like solutions engineering, applied engineers, solution consultants. to add value to your solution, particularly in the upper part of the market, higher deal sizes, you still need to have the time to, do an alignment session with the group, make sure they've got all the information. If you're running too many opportunities that you're letting that slip a little bit, I would recommend owning less opportunities, but making sure that your conversion rate stays healthy. At the same time, folks are coming to me today and say, a rep can handle twice the opportunities that they could handle 3 years ago. I'm like, do you really have that data proven? Does the conversion rate stays the same or does it get better? Does the deal size stays the same? Because if you're telling me they close 2x the opportunities, but the deal size has dropped by 40%, there's a trade-off there as well, right? So you gotta continuously look for, having the right metrics guide your reasoning.
Yeah. You're into the voice AI space. And I'm also generally curious because right now we're also training like digital account executives or SDRs based on inputs of information gathered through VibeCell on real calls. So we can do like more autonomous AEs that can at least handle the first stages of the sales cycle. How far away do you think that is from like real use cases where like people can actually do a discovery with an AI avatar through a phone call or even through a video meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Things are changing. Things have changed, things are changing, and things are going to continue changing. So it's very prudent to look at what is staying the same. And what's staying the same is customers are incredibly demanding, and they demand more and more wide range of options for their solutions that they're looking for at reasonable, fair prices. Customers want to make sure that they can buy at the pace that they can do the sales cycle, not at the pace that the salesperson is telling them they should be doing the cycle. So there is the sales journey, but there's more importantly the buyer journey. And what I would give you an example is, if you're talking about a sector like insurance, I don't think it's very far off from having outbound virtual agent calling an old lady in Dusseldorf and calling her to position a new insurance offering. Especially if you've got like on the CRM, the lady is going to turn 66 years old, so she's entering the last third of their life, of her life. She's entering that chapter where healthcare is really, really important. So you want to robustize the insurance. That's probably a great moment to call her. But again, the call has context, the call has a unique problem that you want to solve, and the call is playing to the sense of reduction of risk. Now, if you think about in a B2B setting, are we more far? I think we are further in that regard because B2B buyers, you still need to be able to navigate politics. I like to give the example of, the fastest growth companies in the world right now, Anthropic, OpenAI, all of these companies, they are hiring salespeople because they are competing with companies that have a lot of entrenched salespeople in the enterprise part. So they need to make sure that they have the adequate size of sales team to monitor and guide the customer over that selling motion. So in other words, you see Anthropic hiring, for example, Salesforce people because they still need Salesforce, even though you could build a CRM with their own stack. But they prefer to buy that solution and focus on what's mission critical for their business. So again, opportunity cost comes into play. The fact that they're hiring a ton of salespeople, again, they are competing with very entrenched companies, the hyperscalers and others, where selling to the enterprise requires a lot of people. Requires probably more people than the ones that we've got on this room. It requires you as the ZAE, it requires myself as a technical salesperson, it requires maybe a BDR to help open pipeline, it requires a business value consultant to make sure that the ROI is really proven, really make sure that you are de-risking the purchasing decision. So I think in that regard, if it's a more complex sales cycle, we are more far off. If it's something more simple, again, look at the examples of what companies might be doing when selling to B2C and see if the first company that will pass the audio Turing test. In other words, are you able to detect that it's a synthetic or a human voice after 5 minutes of conversation? I think we're going to be very close to crossing that threshold.
Impressive. Okay, so Miguel, how do you see Deepgram evolving like in the next couple of years, let's say? Like where do you see the company?
I think it's a unique trajectory the company is in. There's a huge ambition in the company. It's very palpable by the growth that we are doing in Europe. It's very palpable by the investment we are doing in events to make sure that we are talking to the right customers and getting in front of the right people. It's also very palpable from the investments that we are making in product. We've got, a great product team that is focused on launching new solutions that are going to allow us to go from a more single product company into a multi-product company. And I've been on that journey before in other companies, and it's a unique journey to be on, right? When you are able to add more unique solutions to your portfolio that can drive more value to the customer, because then the install base of customers can get very excited about all the consolidation of tools that you can do with them, and they can spend less from a total cost of ownership perspective, but at the same time spend more with you as a provider if you are proving to be able to earn their trust. So I think the trajectory is focused on, strong EMEA growth, making sure that we prioritize markets such as the UK, Spain, and Germany, and DACH and Central, and really making sure that we are growing via our partner network. The network of partners that we are privileged enough to work with today is very, very important. There is a motion that I don't see being discussed enough in, whether that's on podcasts, whether that's on other sources of knowledge that I try to sort of make sure that I look into. Partners, if they are already selling into the buyer persona that you are selling into, if they are already navigating sort of the same problems that you can help solve, and the value of the solutions compounds, there's unique benefits in going to market with partners.
I love it. It's very meaningful to have a strong indirect sales motion, because you will only have a certain limited number of salespeople. And so how do you manage to have other companies talking about you when you're not even in the room?
Yeah.
That's very, very excellent. And we've seen many strong companies today that have been just phenomenal at doing such thing. Like I'm just thinking about Microsoft, for example. Very strong motion on that aspect. Salesforce, of course, has developed that. But okay, so I really love the trajectory. I'm very, very eager to having you back in the podcast once we've seen all of the fruits of what you're doing right now, which of course is going to translate very soon into very meaningful growth for Europe and EMEA more broadly. So Miguel, any final thoughts on what the future of sales is going to look like before we close the podcast?
Yeah, I think to wrap up, and thanks again for the opportunity of having me at a wonderful time. Look at what's staying Look at what's staying the same. Look at what is not changing. In such an era of fast-paced change, what is staying the same? Customers being incredibly demanding, looking for a wide range of options, making sure they get fast time to value on their solutions. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself in a company that can give you the opportunity of tackling all of these, and tackling those with the confidence of having references maybe from other continents that you can bring into the geography that you are working. So it's really, really important to have that credibility when you're showing up in front of your buyers, showing up with credibility, showing up with relevance, showing up with, again, an accurate pitch that is focused on what problem are you solving, for how long have you been solving this problem, and why is it that this is such a big problem if you don't fix it.
Thank you, Miguel. This is Miguel Arroja, sales leader at EMEA for Deepgram. Thanks a million for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much, João.
Thank you very much.